What happens when a Hollywood legend walks onto a morning show expecting soft questions and ends up ambushed on live TV? Tom Cruise thought he was sitting down for a routine Good Morning America interview to promote the latest Mission Impossible installment. What he got instead was a calculated takedown attempt from George Stephanopoulos, an ambush so hostile it would end with security escorting Cruise off the set in front of a stunned studio. But let's rewind. From the moment the cameras rolled, something felt off. George flashed his usual TV smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Across from him, Cruise sat with the seasoned ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Megawatt smile, relaxed posture, all systems go. Tom Cruise. George began, voice smooth as ever. "Thanks for being here this morning." "Always a pleasure, George." Tom replied upbeat. "Can't wait to talk about this new film. The stunts, the locations. This team pulled off something really special." But George wasn't here to talk about stunts. Before Cruise could settle in, George leaned forward, his tone sharpening. "Before we dive into the movie, let's talk about the controversies that follow you. Scientology, for instance. Critics say you've used your platform to promote what many consider a dangerous cult. What do you say to them?" The air shifted. Cruise's smile flickered for a fraction of a second. This wasn't pre-approved. This wasn't in the notes. He recovered quickly, diplomatic. "Well, George, today I'd really prefer to focus on the film. That's why I'm here. I think your viewers tuned in for Mission Impossible, not recycled tabloid fodder." But George wasn't backing down. His grin widened. "Oh, I think our viewers deserve transparency. You've been the face of this organization for decades. You've recruited other celebrities. Don't you think the public deserves answers?" Cruise's jaw tightened. He was still smiling, but the tension was unmistakable. His hands, once relaxed on the chair arms, were now gripping them ever so slightly. "With all due respect," Tom said slowly, "this movie represents years of work from hundreds of talented people. If you want a different conversation, let's have it off camera." "But we're on camera now." George pressed, voice edged with condescension. "You've influenced millions. Don't you think you owe them some accountability?" Silence. Studio crew froze. No one had expected this. Cruise didn't blink. His voice dropped a register. Accountability. For what? Entertaining people. Doing my own stunts. Pushing cinematic boundaries with world-class teams. What exactly am I being put on trial for? George. George theatrically shuffled his notes, stalling for dramatic effect. He wasn't done. "Well, since you brought up the stunts, some say your insistence on doing your own dangerous sequences is just ego, that you're putting entire productions at risk because you won't admit you're aging. Insurance delays? Actor concerns? How do you justify that?" This time, the smile vanished. Cruise leaned forward, voice low and razor sharp. "That's out of line. I work with the best stunt coordinators on Earth. I train for months. Every safety protocol is followed. I don't risk lives. I raise standards." George didn't flinch. "And yet there've been injuries, delays, insurance nightmares, all because Tom Cruise insists on being the action hero. Is that commitment or selfishness?" That was the breaking point. Tom stood, chair skidding back with a screech. Crew scrambled. Cameras adjusted. The studio felt like it was holding its breath. "I'm done," he said, tone flat final. "This isn't journalism. It's a hit job." Within seconds, studio security appeared softly, but firmly, moving Tom toward the exit as the segment fell into chaos. George sat back, face unreadable, as the most famous movie star in the world walked off his set without looking back. His face was flushed now. Decades of media training, cracking. George's relentless, smirking barrage had finally pierced the armor. "You know what, George?" Tom said, his voice low, simmering. "I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've worked with the best in this industry. People who trust me, people who know I would never compromise their safety or the integrity of a project. I don't know what your angle is today, but this This isn't journalism. It's a hit job. George leaned back, smug. He had done it. Tom Cruise, the unshakable professional, was on the verge of losing it, live on national television. I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered. George replied coolly. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe that says more about the questions than it does about me. The Tom's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from sheer adrenaline. He'd walked into a promotional interview. He was now in a public trial. And George Stephanopoulos was sitting there, with that smug little tilt of his head, acting like he was doing some great civic duty. Tom inhaled slowly, steadying himself. But George wasn't done. Tom, please, George said with Fox concern, gesturing toward the empty chair. Sit. We're not finished. I think our viewers deserve to hear your side of these important issues. Important issues. Tom's voice rose, just slightly, but enough to freeze the room. You invited me here to talk about a movie. A movie that employed hundreds of people, took years to make, and that audiences around the world are excited to see. Instead, you ambush me with tabloid garbage and twisted half-truths. George's face hardened. The mask was slipping. Tabloid garbage? He said sharply. I'm talking about documented incidents. Public statements. An organization that's been condemned by former members, families, even law enforcement. Are you saying none of that matters? What I'm saying, Tom replied, his voice now firm, rising with each word, is that you're supposed to be a journalist, George. Where's your objectivity? Where's your fairness? You made up your mind about me before I even walked on set. In the control room, panic. Producers whispering urgently. Cut to commercial. Ride the wave. Either way, this interview had turned into a media firestorm in real time. George adjusted his posture, voice slipping into lecture mode. Tom, my job is to hold public figures accountable. You can't come on TV, plug your movie, and expect a free pass. The American people deserve to know who they're supporting. Tom narrowed his eyes. The American people. You think you speak for them? You think they wake up to watch you ambush guests and call it journalism? They tune in for honesty. George fired back. Something that seems to be in short supply with certain celebrities. That did it. Tom stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until he was looming just over George's desk. The sudden proximity made the veteran anchor instinctively lean back. You want honesty, Tom said, voice now razor sharp. Here it is, I've spent my life trying to entertain people, to move them, to give them a break from the chaos. I've supported charities. I've lifted people up. I've made personal choices, sure. But I've never sat across from someone and tried to break them for sport. Now George was on the defensive. The smugness faltered. He hadn't anticipated this version of Tom Cruise, the one who didn't break. The one who turned the camera around. I'm not trying to destroy anyone, George protested weakly. I'm just doing my job. Your job. Tom laughed, cold. Your job is to inform people, not corner them. Your job is to be fair, not smug. Your job is to serve the audience, not your own ego. That one landed. George's face reddened instantly. He wasn't used to being called out on his own set. How dare you question my integrity? George snapped, voice rising. I've been doing this for decades. I've interviewed presidents, world leaders, people who actually matter. The silence that followed was nuclear. Tom tilted his head, voice low, controlled. People who actually matter, he repeated. So I don't matter. The people who love my work, who pay to see these films, who laugh, cry, and escape because of what we make. They don't matter. The crews who bust their asses for years to bring these stories to life. They're not worth your respect. George realized the misstep. But it was too late. The words were out. Immortalized, that's not what I meant, George stammered. But even he didn't believe it. No, Tom said. That's exactly what you meant. Because to you, unless someone sits behind a desk and reads from a teleprompter, they're just entertainment. Just product. Just disposable. The studio was still. Even the camera ops weren't moving. Something rare was happening. Not a meltdown, not a tantrum, a reckoning. And Tom Cruise was just getting started. You know what's really interesting, George? You keep talking about accountability, Tom said. Voice steady but edged with fire. About holding people responsible. But what about your accountability, George? What about your responsibility? To be fair, to be honest, to treat your guests with a shred of human decency. George opened his mouth, but Tom didn't give him the chance. When was the last time you asked yourself who you're really serving? The audience? Or your own ego? When was the last time you stopped and thought, maybe my job isn't to tear people down, but to lift them up? Maybe it's to inform, not destroy. George shifted uncomfortably, his rehearsed poise cracking. I don't have to listen to this, he muttered, voice barely holding. Actually, Tom said, stepping forward. You do. He wasn't yelling. He didn't have to. His voice was precise, unwavering, razor-sharp truth slicing through studio air. Because unlike you, I'm not hiding behind loaded questions and self-righteous theater. I'm telling you exactly what I think. Directly. Honestly. You said you wanted honesty, didn't you? George looked around, eyes darting to the control room. But no one moved. The producers were frozen, stunned like the rest of the crew. The takedown artist was being dismantled. Lev, Tom, maybe we should cut to a commercial break. George finally managed. Oh no, Tom said, shaking his head. You wanted this live. You wanted the cameras rolling while you tried to humiliate me. So let's keep them rolling now. George's complexion had gone from flushed to pale, sweat glistening beneath the studio lights. The master of the morning show was unraveling before an audience of millions, and there was no off-ramp. Let's just move on to the film, George tried weakly. Move on. Tom's tone was disbelief mixed with fury. You think you can spend 10 minutes attacking my beliefs, undermining my career, insulting my professionalism, and then move on like nothing happened. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of George's unraveling posture. The once commanding anchor now looked like a man trying to claw his way out of his own interview. You know what I find most disturbing? Tom said, pacing slowly behind his chair. It's not that you ambushed me. It's not that you tried to humiliate me on national television. It's that you thought you could get away with it. He stopped, turning to face George directly. You thought I'd just sit there and smile, didn't you? Because that's what you're used to. Celebrities so desperate for promotion, they let you walk all over them. George tried to cut in. Tom, I never intended. Don't, Tom said sharply, slicing the air with his voice. Don't insult both of us by pretending this wasn't planned. You came in with your gotcha questions. You wanted your viral moment. You wanted to be the guy who took down Tom Cruise on live television. George looked stunned, like he'd been stripped bare. But here's what you didn't count on. Tom continued, voice rising in power. You didn't count on me fighting back. You didn't count on me refusing to play the game. You didn't count on me calling out your behavior for what it is: petty, performative, and unprofessional. George's mouth opened again, but no words came out. He was losing control and he knew it. Tom, I'm going to have to ask you too. To what? Tom cut in, stepping even closer now, voice low but thunderous. To sit down and be quiet while you misrepresent me. To let you smear me on camera and say thank you afterward. No. That's not how this ends. You want me to leave? Tom asked quietly. To stop embarrassing you on your own show. Pretend none of this just happened. He stepped toward George's desk, not with anger, but with a calm, commanding presence that made the air in the room shift. Let me tell you something about the real world, George. His voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. Out there, when you treat people with disrespect, when you are consequences, when you abuse your position, people notice. When you forget the responsibility that comes with a platform, There are repercussions. George opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked lost, dismantled. A veteran host, undone by the very guest he tried to corner. Tom pressed on. You want to talk about accountability. His tone sharpened. Let's talk about yours. How do you explain to your producers that you turned a simple movie promo into an ambush? How do you explain to your viewers that you used their trust to push your own agenda? And how do you explain to yourself that you forgot what journalism is even for? The studio fell silent. Even the crew had stopped moving. You could hear a pin drop. This wasn't a meltdown. It was a reckoning. A role reversal. You know what the saddest part is, Tom said. Softer now. Almost regretful. I used to respect you. Thought you were one of the last good ones. Someone who cared about facts, about fairness, about truth. But all I see now is a guy who confused having a platform with having wisdom. George fumbled with his notes, hands shaking, but Tom wasn't done. There are real stories out there. Real injustice. Real questions that deserve airtime. And instead of using your voice to shine a light, you used it for this. A cheap stunt. A desperate play for clicks at the expense of someone else's dignity. George finally spoke, his voice barely audible. Tom, I think we need to end this interview. Tom let out a dry laugh. Now you want to end it? He asked. Now that you're the one being questioned. Now that you're the one squirming under the light. How convenient. Side George glanced toward the control room and made the throat, cutting motion to cut the feed. But Tom saw it and shook his head. No, George, you don't get to cut away now. This was your idea, remember? You wanted fireworks. You wanted conflict. You wanted a moment. Well, congratulations. You got one. Then Tom turned to the camera, voice steady, gaze unflinching. To everyone watching at home, what you just saw is what happens when journalism forgets its purpose. When spectacle matters more than substance. When ego trumps integrity. And when gotcha replaces truth. George tried to reclaim control. Tom, I'm the host of this show. I'm telling you this is over. Tom turned back, voice like ice. You're right. It is over, but not because you said so. Because I'm walking away. That's the difference. He stood tall, straightened his jacket, then faced the camera once more. To anyone who tuned in hoping to hear about Mission Impossible, I'm sorry. That wasn't my call. But I can promise you this, the movie was made with the same integrity I tried to bring into this interview. I hope you'll judge it on its own merits, not on what this segment turned into. Tom turned and began walking toward the exit. The cameras followed him, not with pity, but awe, composed, unbothered, fully in control. George, now visibly rattled, called out one last time. Tom, wait, can't we just? Tom stopped, turned, looked at him. George, he said gently, next time you want to interview someone, try remembering they're a human being first and a story second. Maybe then, you'll remember what journalism is supposed to be. And with that, Tom Cruise walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving behind a shaken host, a stunned crew, and one of the most unforgettable live moments in television history. The broadcast cut to commercial, but the damage was already done.